Hey everyone, my name's Chris Lambert, and this is a continuation of our Ask Me Anything from the other day. Y'all asked so many questions that we had to have two parts, so let's get cracking on these and see if we can get through them all without having to make a part three or before my dog starts wanting more attention. So Axron says, would you consider the Yei Mountains one of the seven wonders of the world, and would you ever visit them in real life? Yeah, I would love to visit them. Just Wyoming. Wyoming in general seems really beautiful and would be great to just kind of explore and see some of the beautiful sights of. And those mountains definitely feel very iconic after Kanye put them on the Yay cover. I don't know if I'd make them one of the seven wonders of the world, but for the sake of this being a Kanye channel, yes, I would say that they should be one of the seven wonders of the world. I think if I was going to photograph them too, I wouldn't want to just recreate the cover. I'd want to get, I don't know, a different angle, closer, just see them in a unique way. That's my photographer brain and artist brain starting to get like churning though. Isaac Patton said, what is your favorite unreleased Kanye track? Law of Attraction. Use This Gospel, I love. It's my favorite song on Jick, Jesus is King by far. Jick just seems weird to say out loud. Jesus is King. But as much as I really love Use This Gospel, and it's, I think, like a top 20 Kanye song for me. That's how much I like that song. Law of Attraction could have been a top 3 Kanye song to me. There's just something about the refrain and vocals on that just are exactly what I want. The concept and the actual lyrics blow me away every time I listen to it. It's such a shame that song is unfinished. And while I'm happy with Use This Gospel, it's just, man, what could have been. Never See Me Again thoughts. Yeah, Never See Me Again. The whole story about it's really fascinating because My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is a response to the Taylor Swift incident, but he doesn't necessarily address it as specifically as I think a lot of people were hoping that he would, right? So then you have this situation where people are left going like, well, how did he really feel about it? Like, what more said, not looking at the metaphors on the album, right? And that he did comment on it, but just in a very artsy way. Never See Me Again feels like the kind of song that more people would have liked to have heard. And then all the implications, right, from the use of the sample and the story of the girl that he took the sample from, the kinds of suicidal topics that the song brings up, and how that might have applied to Kanye at that time. It's very thought-provoking, but I don't know. I'm usually not that into unreleased music and what it means just in general versus the actual album and what we got on the album. I'm still very happy with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. I'm glad the song's not on the album because it just doesn't quite fit the artistry to me of what's going on the album. So interesting, and like an interesting side note or footnote in the story of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Kanye, but it's not one that I like lose my mind over in terms of like, can you believe this? Sam, yeah, why aren't people considering that the divorce is fake? I just don't think it's something that's like, I personally do not want to be the person that's speculating on whether or not a divorce is real or fake. Like, I would rather take people at their words and believe that they're going through something and that it's emotional and delicate and respect that, and end up being wrong, but feel good about not doubting than doubt and end up being wrong about my doubts. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel necessarily in good taste to speculate on that. So I just don't think that would be something that they would do, especially with having 4 kids. So, I mean, if you're thinking that, we'll see, but it's not something that I'm considering at the moment. Michael XI, what are your favorite animes? I highly recommend Made in Abyss. Haven't heard of that. Steins Gate, I have heard of, but haven't seen. And Serial Experiments Lane. I also have not heard of that. My favorite animes, like classic, I loved Dragon Ball Z. It was the first anime that I really got into. Super was good, but it's not Dragon Ball Z, right? it has some hype moments and some moments where you're like, this is Dragon Ball, but not quite the same. I love Escaflowne, Cowboy Bebop, Gurren Lagann. I really liked Bleach. I watched all of Bleach, Gundam Wing. These are some basic answers. I know I know I've watched some more unique anime. I mean, I guess Gurren Lagann's kind of ReZero I like a lot. Um, but I'm blanking on some of the others right now. Huh. Currently watching Iron Blooded Orphans, which has been good. Not great, but good. I think ReZero is my current favorite of the. Oh, Attack on Titan too. I love Attack on Titan to the point where I think Attack on Titan might objectively be one of the greatest shows of all time. Like, it's on that level of just scope, scale, and insanity. Have you watched the Kanye Iceberg video by Rhythmic Reasoning? It's a really great video, and I think you'll love it. I cried at the end after listening to Never See Me Again. You and Yeezus Mask should talk. Yeah, the video, I've gone through parts of it, and really a lot of praise and like respect for Rhythmic Reasoning and putting that together. But it's 99% information that I know. So it's hard to kind of sit there and just watch something where it's like, I know that, 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 and do that when the videos are as long as they are. So I haven't just watched the full things yet, but slowly working through it. If you could, but I highly recommend everybody go watch those videos. Like, it's worth watching, especially other people may not have a Kanye channel where they learn all of this stuff. So I'm sure that there's going to be a ton of things that you take away from that video that you're just like, huh, I did not know that. If you could choose a genre of music that Kanye hasn't touched for him to do, what would that be? Just rock. I would love to see him collaborate with more, not quite like heavy metal, and not quite like, I don't want him to work with, what's the Imagine Dragons? Like, that would be stupid. But like Disturbed, Tool, just other kind of rock legends. Linkin Park, I'd even like, well, what's left of Linkin Park? That's sad. But I would like to see that. Queens of the Stone Age and Kanye, like, that would be amazing to me. How did your interest with Kanye West start? It was the George Bush doesn't care about black people not interruption, but moment that made me really pay attention to Kanye and want to like him more. And then 808s and Heartbreak, just really feeling like Heartless stood out and was unlike anything I'd really ever heard. Got me into Kanye as well. Lost Taste Buds, not to get too personal, but how much money have you made from this channel thus far since starting? I think the channel at this point can range anywhere from making like $50 to $300 in a month. Like, I think our best month was $300, and that was during all the, was it Yandi stuff or Jesus is King stuff? We just had like one video that popped off. So it's not like groundbreaking amounts of money, right? I mean, hopefully one day it could be, but it's not something where it's like, I'm living off of this channel, though I would like to, you know? So if you haven't subscribed, Noise, what would be your perfect 10-track Kanye album? Pick from any song in his discography, possible even guest appearances. I think I would just, man, there's different ways of going about it. There's a way where you like make something that's very thematic. You can make something that's capturing like every aspect of every album. I think I would like to go, you could do something that's just like production based, right? Going brighter songs versus darker songs. I would end up wanting to go epics. I tend to like epics more than anything else. So I'd just do something that's like Last Call, Gone, The Glory, Love Lockdown, Runaway, and then what on No Church in the Wild, I think I would put on there. Blood on the Leaves, St. Pablo. Is it St. Pablo? Yeah, I guess probably St. Pablo. Ghost Town, and then Use This Gospel. I think I'd go that. You know, I could maybe take off Use This Gospel and put on something like Blame Game. I mean, there are albums I'd want to double up on, but I do like the idea of like an epic from each album, which ignores Ghost Town for Use This Gospel, but I feel like Ghost Town doesn't have like quite the same degree of epics as the other albums. Like you could point to everything like Reborn being an epic, but I feel like Use This Gospel is almost bigger than Reborn in some ways. Ryan Grosso, have you ever met Kanye? No, but I have gotten to hang out with Kanye's cousin. Also, do you have any Kanye vinyl or vinyl in general? I don't have a lot of vinyl. I do have a few Kanye vinyl, right? I have Yay, I have Kids See Ghosts, and that's it. So those are my vinyls. Fairs, how did you react when Kanye followed you on Twitter? I did a big answer on that in part 1, so check it out if you haven't yet. Did you ever meet Kanye? Have not. Favorite Kanye album cover? Favorite album cover, I think, has to be between My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and okay, Arch, and The Life of Pablo. There's something about Life of Pablo's cover that's just amazing. Down. Okay. Ewan, hey Chris, what unreleased Ye songs are you most excited for? I mean, if we ever got a finished Law of Attraction, that would be fantastic. LA Monster is also one that I really like. I don't know why, but I really like LA Monster. So those two. And what's the other one? Like Can You Be? But that was Cuddy redid that. See Me Now? No. I forget what the other one is, but those ones. But I'm not as into the unreleased song community as a lot of people are. I tend to just focus on what we have. I do pick up on things here and there, especially if it keeps coming up over time. I'm just like, all right, I finally need to listen to this. But I tend to just prefer more the finished music overall. Favorite animal? Or no, anime. Wow, anime. Yeah. Maybe Gurren Lagann, Attack on Titan, Dragon Ball Z. One of those like 3 probably competes for number 1. Though I feel like for some reason I'm just seeing what Archer's doing, blanking on one that I love, and for some reason I'm just not remembering at the moment. Weird. Have you ever noticed or spoke retrospective hip hop? Have you ever noticed or spoke on Kanye mentioning lights in some form or fashion and throwing your hands up to the sky on almost all of his albums? Also, out of all your analyses, I think that Kanye wanting acceptance from the hood and for the streets and graduation is the most accurate, and I think it also helped in derailing 50s rap career. Yeah, it did seem like Kanye, we just did our recap on graduation, and it just felt like Kanye was in a lot of ways trying to prove himself to the industry, to the public, and really on graduation was trying to say like, yeah, I'm a hood favorite. I made a hood anthem, and you all like me, right? Look at me competing with 50. Like, I don't know. There's just something about his searching for acceptance and to solidify his place in hip hop on that album that makes for a very fascinating journey. We've talked a little bit about lights, like when Flashing Lights, when we did our episode on that, we were talking a little bit about connections to all of the lights and just his idea. I think it all stems back from the limelight, right? And how fame influences things. And I feel like all these songs that end up mentioning the light end up having to do in some way with fame. So it just kind of ties back into one of the major themes of Kanye's discography. And same with like Hands Up or Touch the, like Hands Up to the Sky, Touch the Sky. We talked about that a little bit on graduation, specifically from like We Don't Care to Touch the Sky to, is it Champion or something else? On graduation, Kanye talks about like hands up or touching the sky, and you're just like, okay, so this is a refrain that he keeps bringing up, but he's getting further and further away from some of the communal aspects and the inspirational aspects that he was trying to deliver on those first 2 albums, as he tends to become more self-interested and disconnected from Chicago. That as we see that happening on graduation, when we get to 808s and Heartbreak, there's so much isolation, and you can watch that isolation grow from College Dropout to Late Registration to graduation. It's stunning how much of a story Kanye's discography feels like. Luke Jameson, are you interested in screenwriting? Yeah, yes. I mean, I was gonna be a film major in college, like creative writing and film double major, and I did take a couple screenwriting classes, but I still am just more interested in poetry and fiction. I'd like to consult on movies more so than I want to write the script, though Travis and I do have a couple script ideas that we want to write at some point. I don't know if we'll ever get to it, but I definitely think when I do novels in terms of a cinematic way, the same way that I think Kanye goes about albums in a very cinematic way, thinking about them in terms of movies just as much as albums. Wojak, Honkman, what do you want or think will be on LP10? I'm just curious in what Kanye is going to give us. Like, I've never been disappointed with a Kanye album, so I'm just excited to see where he goes next. And it might be a little shock at first, the same way like listening to Ye for the first time. You kind of go, "What is this?" And then you start seeing the genius of it. So I don't necessarily go into Kanye albums with expectations or hopes in that way, just with the I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next as an artist. DP, what's Archer's favorite Kanye song? I'd like to say that Archer has a favorite Kanye song, but I don't know if he does. Is there one that mentions the word walk? He's just right over there. Mentions that word enough because that would be his favorite one, because when he hears that word, he freaks out. Connor, if you could have one leaked confirmed track from Donda officially released early as a single, which one would you pick? I haven't really listened to any of the leaks or any of the confirmed tracks just because I feel like with Kanye albums, it's just always up in the air and I don't want to get too attached to a song before it comes out. So there's not one that I would currently pick. I would just hope LA Monster would be on the album, even though that wasn't ever on any of the track lists. So that's Rough Criminal. How do you feel about fan-made track list? I made one for The Life of Pablo, but saw would be down to discuss why on your podcast, but saw you retweeted a thread of someone who did every Kanye album, and that irked me. Yeah, that thread was like annoying because they were trying to improve the albums and removing these great songs. It's just like, what? I think fan-made track lists can be interesting. I don't like the idea of fans saying this is the superior version to the album. That's a little condescending, though I would probably do that for another artist. I'd be like, well, they should really have done it this way. But given my position that every Kanye album is a narrative album and that the songs each play an important role on the albums, it's hard to like get around the idea that this should be changed. Like, I get changing it for a different flow, different aesthetic. It's just has a different energy when you listen to it this way. Like, if you were to start My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy with Runaway, how does that change everything? If it ends with All of the Lights, how does that change everything? So I think it can be really fascinating to look at. But given that the album seems so based around the narrative and I'm so attached to those narratives, it can be hard just to like look at a track list and be like, this isn't the main one, and that's the one that I care about the most. So, but I do like the thought, how thought provoking the track list can be sometimes. James Burnett, not sure if you're into hockey, but who do you want to win the Stanley Cup? If not, then the World Series. World Series, the Cleveland Indians, always. Unfortunately, I feel like that will never happen in my lifetime. My dad was born in 1940, right? And so he got to see the Indians win a World Series in like 1947 and then never again. So maybe I'll get that, maybe not. I did get to see the Cavs win a championship, which felt good. Stanley Cup, I was bigger in hockey in middle school and high school. Like, I was playing all the NHL games that would come out each year. I was always the Detroit Red Wings. Loved Steve Yzerman and Lindstrom, and have soft spot for like that era of hockey, especially like the 90s, early 2000s. But it's been a long time since I've watched. I don't even really know who's on. I don't know if I know any of the players currently playing anymore. Is Ovechkin still playing? Yeah. So I don't know. Whoever you want to win is who I want to win. Yeah. Bailey. So let me know how we're doing, Bailey, when did you first listen to Kanye's music? I saw Kanye, I said this in the other one, but I actually saw Kanye in concert in 2004 when he opened for Usher. I didn't know who he was and remember liking the songs, but didn't like write down his name and rush out because I was just like, oh, this is just an opening act. some nobody that'll probably, he was good, but I don't know if he'll ever be anything. Like, so pretentious. But he went on to be Kanye West, you know? But the first song I remember really like understanding was a Kanye West song was Gold Digger. That came out my freshman year of college. So I don't really remember Jesus Walks. I wasn't listening to the radio a lot. So Jesus Walks was probably big already, as was All Falls Down, but I just wasn't listening to radio music. So never heard Through the Wire or anything like that. But when I was in college, Gold Digger was just everywhere, right? You're sitting like in the cafeteria or you're at a party and somebody's playing the song. So that was when I first really started to be like, oh, Kanye makes some good singles, doesn't he? I'm completely not remembering that that's the guy that I saw just a year before open for Usher. Priyanshu, how to read a long novel when you're not interested in it, but you have to for the exams. So I never read a single book in college. I wrote a 22-page critical examination of Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov without reading the book, which is a lot more difficult than probably reading the book. But I just did a ton of research, like putting together what other people wrote. I read like maybe 10 pages, 20 pages into the book, enough to kind of get some idea of text and tone, but was just reading a lot of the critical commentary around it and piecing things together, and wrote this introduction that got an A. And it was my like senior thesis for my major, right? Like you had to do your thesis and then your major thesis, and that was my major thesis, which is insane to me. But so I guess just don't, and Wikipedia and be really good at context clues. I mean, that was the thing I could really fall back on. I've always been good with narrative and being able to see if it's like A, B, and C, it's probably going to be X, Y, Z. And predicting where a story is going to go. So I really relied on that and my ability to just make things up on the spots to answer questions and pick up on context that somebody else had said and connect it with what someone else in class had said. I always also listened very carefully in discussion and sat in the front of the classroom. So this is probably a more detailed answer than you wanted for this question. The other thing to do is just to put your finger on the page and follow it along and scan down. You won't get every word, but you at least feel like you're keeping momentum going, and you'll start kind of catching up with what your finger's doing, and just keep doing that down the page, right? Do, reading everything as you go as quickly as possible. Latations, why As I Thought About Killing You your favorite Ye song? So I like avant-garde things. I like things that break from traditional structures or twist on structures. Like Fight Club's my favorite movie. The Wire's my favorite TV show, which I feel like all three of those things. My favorite book is 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. Like all of them are pretty avant-garde compared to what other like shows, movies, things were doing at the time. And I Thought About Killing You, just starting in that place of a spoken word before moving into more of singing and then to rapping, like that idea of escalation is amazing to me. But then it's put into this package of beautiful thoughts are next to the darkest and setting up that whole concept on the album. So you start very philosophical and dark, and you note every time that he says the most beautiful thoughts are next to the darkest, he does that little hum afterwards, but the humming builds. The first time it's not there. Then he says like, I thought about killing you, and then and it escalates each time. So it's this dark thought and then music, right? The start of music until the last time he says it and then starts singing. So you're almost seeing the ramping up of the artistic brain, right? Where he's starting to feel these things inside, say them out loud, and start to feel music coming forth after saying these things and feeling them until he goes into song and then the whole album. And I just think that is such an incredible thing to do and to not announce it, right? He doesn't tell you what he's doing, but just does it. And you either figure it out or convince yourself is what he's doing, which I'm sure somebody would be like, Chris, you're reaching. That's a stretch. I don't think it is. But for him to do that and have it fit in with the narrative of the album, set up the album, but work with the song, and just some of the lines in the song, especially that middle section, are so beautiful to me. I just can't get over how bizarre it is and how cool I think it is, right? Even though it's very atypical for a song and isn't great like music, it's just fascinating to me, and I enjoy it every time it comes on. Olotomi, what's your favorite piece of Kanye merchandise that you own and why? I think still the Yeezys, if that counts as Kanye merchandise. Otherwise, I don't necessarily have much. I think I like my orange Wyoming shirt a lot, and the yellow one with the skeleton on it. That one's cool. The Pornhub one, the Pornhub Awards, like Mia Malkova one, cracks me up, but I can never wear it anywhere. So I have a lot of like 2018 merch, and then uh, my cool new shoes. Michael New Shoes sent me whatchamacallit, Life of Pablo tour shirt that's pretty awesome. So I really like that as well. Um, Aaron, favorite Kanye song and first Kanye song you ever heard? So favorite Kanye song, I thought about Killing You for the reasons I just said. First Kanye song you ever heard? I mean, at concert, he would have played like, I guess all the things like Through the Wire, All Falls Down, when he opened for Usher, that I just didn't realize were Kanye. But the first one that I recognized as a Kanye song was Gold Digger. T-Stamp, from everything you've personally heard from the Yandhi leaks, do you think a fully realized version of the album would have lived up to all the hype, or that it's only still talked about because it was the closest Kanye album that we never got? Also, Cash to Burn has one of the best draft concepts if you haven't heard it yet. I haven't heard Cash to Burn's draft concepts, so I don't even know what that sentence means. Yandi, I listened to the leaks when there was like the complete leaks, and I don't think it's as amazing as other people do. I don't know if I've ever admitted that out loud, and maybe that's going to be as disappointing to a lot of you. It's not necessarily the production that I'm most excited about. Law of Attraction is, but that's about it. So I honestly, it's funny because people were so excited about Yandi when they got Jesus is King. They're just like, oh no, Yandi would have been so much better. But honestly, I like Jesus is King production wise more than I like Yandi. So I'm sure some people just hit unsubscribe. I'm sorry. But yeah, I will say though that like, Yandi Cello was like wild, and I'm not saying that like the Jesus is King version is better, or like Law of Attraction clearly I would have preferred over Use This Gospel, but it's just the rest of the songs right in the package I wasn't as into. Some of the production and melody choices, it's just not what I'm as interested in. Like 80 Degrees, right? This is controversial too. It's cool, but it's not the thing where I'm like losing my mind. I'm way more excited over the production on Site than I am about the production on 80 Degrees. So, Kane Will, fave Kanye beats. Favorite beats might be The Glory's infectious, Gone's infectious. I love Hell of a Life. Like, I get really excited over the Hell of a Life beat, which I guess other people hate, which is disappointing to me. But I might say Hell of a Life. I'm just like saying all these opinions that are just not popular at this point, and being like, oh, my favorite beat is Hell of a Life. Like, what? Who says that? But it's one of my favorites. Yeah. Alien. My friends and I argued about which Madagascar character each Kanye collaborator is like. In my opinion, Kanye West is King Julian, Cudi is Maurice, and Chance the Rapper is Mort. Am I wrong? You're right. Also, how do you feel about my idea that all books should be written in the style of the Bible so certain sentences can be found easier? My favorite line in the Jesus book, 14:14. Thoughts? That is a nice... that would be fun if all books were like that. It would make school a lot easier and reference points a lot easier in texts. So I think you're onto something with that. Madagascar was a movie that was a little like after my like I wasn't watching like Madagascar, Ice Age, or Cars, which I think all kind of came out around the same time. So I don't think I've ever seen the movie to answer that question, but I just have a feeling you're right, you know? Noah, hi, love the content recently. That's good. I'm glad it's been good. I was just wondering if you knew why in late registration Kanye put the Diamonds from Sierra Leone remix before the original song on the track list. Was on my mind when I was listening through late registration. Not random at all. Kanye made the original song, and I'm pretty sure he said he like really liked it, but then he wanted Jay-Z to be on the album, and just got Jay's part for Diamonds. So he heard Jay's portion, was just like, damn. And I think went back and did the newer version, right? With that new intro. So yeah. Is that right? Is that wrong? I think that's right. Is that wrong? Huh. God, it's only been like 3 months since we covered that song, or 4 months since we covered that song. And for some reason, I'm blanking entirely on the OG. But I'm pretty sure when we talked about it, it was that Kanye just did it. And then when he got Jay-Z, he was just like, all right, this one is way better. I'm going to put this on the album. And it also fits because having Nas for We Major and just getting to put the remix with Jay-Z against a song, like the next song having Nas on it, is just such a fitting thing that not can any other artist say that they did that on an album. Maybe somebody could, but damn, Kanye did that. He got Jay-Z and Nas on back-to-back tracks on an album. That's amazing, especially with how close that was to the feud that Jay-Z and Nas had. So when you're looking at the track list, like the original is now just considered bonus content, right? Not part of the track list whatsoever. And then the remix is what's actually the main version of the song at this point. My ideal version of it is like a mixture. We talked about that on the episode too. Actually, somebody made the mix for us, but it's a super cut that has that Kanye verse from the OG, the second verse that's so long, put into as like a fourth verse. It comes in after Jay-Z's verse, and that's how the song ends, which it's a really cool like cut. I think it's like a 5 to 6 minutes edit. I might repost it to Kanye Edits and see if they can put it together again. I have the file on my computer. Maybe I can just post that and send it to people. I don't know if that's a good answer to your question, though. I should have done some prep before answering some of these. Tom F., do you think that Donda EP10 can ever live up to the hype and will be worth the wait? I think every Kanye album struggles with hype because so many people hold the newest album in expectations versus whatever album they loved before, right? So Yeezus was one where everybody's thinking like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy was amazing. Then they hear Yeezus. A lot of people are like, what the hell is this? And then even like Life of Pablo is one of those things where people just don't know how to take it because it sounds so different from everything that comes before. So I don't know if even if Kanye didn't have any hype regarding this album, it's just hard for a new album to compete when people already have such a love for your previous sounds. So unless Kanye was going to repeat the sound from an album, which is something that I don't think he's ever done, there's always going to be a hurdle for people with the newest album. It's just a question of how quickly can people adjust to the album versus will it live up to the hype? Because I don't think Kanye's missed on an album yet, so I don't expect him to start. Time Bandit, opinion on Yeezy brand, Kanye's fashion evolution and the fact that he wore Nike Vandals while still being with Adidas. Yeah, it was a photo of Kanye getting out of a car just like a month ago, 2 months ago, having his mask on, right? But he's wearing Nike Vandals, and that shocked people. And he talked about in 2019, the end of 2020, how he wanted to be able to wear Nikes and it was stupid that he couldn't. So he was finally photographed wearing Nikes for the first time in years, which is kind of wild. Yeezy brand is, I think, awesome. I clearly like the shoes. I wish the clothes were more readily available, especially after all this time. It still feels like, despite how much progress he's made fashion-wise, that the clothes still aren't quite on the same level as the shoes when I think that they could be. It just seems like behind the scenes with the manufacturing processes, things just aren't as easy. So, as easy for Yeezy. But I've always liked Kanye's eyes when it comes. I've always liked Kanye's eyes. I've always liked Kanye's eye for fashion. And am curious to see how the Yeezy Gap line performs, how it looks, what pieces I'll get from it, and how they work into my wardrobe. I do think that Kanye will one day try to bridge the gap between Adidas and Nike, or work for both, or do something like wild that's game changing and groundbreaking. So I'm very happy he's in the fashion space because I think it fuels him creatively. It's obviously given him an empire's worth of money to work with. And I think that it's just going to continue to push fashion forward. Do you believe he wore the mask intentionally so that he could prove that Kanye was breaking the Adidas contract? Nah, I don't think he would have cared either way. I just think he was wearing Vandals that day and didn't change into different shoes. Or maybe it wasn't Kanye at all. Maybe we're going with this multiple Kanye theory. ECR, are you ever going to do My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy again? Notice it's not on the Patreon anymore, but I think I remember you guys missed some bits, etc. The album title actually being a microcosm of the macro of the story of the album, and the story repeating multiple times throughout the album, the poem of dark fantasy, the narrative of hell of a life. Oh, recently realized this, and now makes me feel almost on the level of top for me, and Lost in the World essentially being the most defining song of Kanye's philosophy art in terms of recognizing the cycles of loss, death, and decay in life, but living for the journey and build of progress anyway. Also, a side note, re-listening to All the Lights, where he uses hypothetical daughter as a metaphor for his inner child art, made me realize how violent crimes properly fits into the Ye narrative, and also with it being My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy 2, the Kanye narrative, looking at the most beautiful thoughts beside the darkest. Listened to that episode a while ago and can't remember if you touched on that, but really made it click for me, especially with how it finally ends with the next she'll be off to college, then at the altar, finally returning to the pre-college dropout Kanye of Family God, but with a greater perspective. Yeah, so we are covering My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy again. It was the thing where the first time through the discography, we did all of College Dropout, and we're like, that took a long time. We want to talk about the rest of the albums. So we did all the track ones, all the track twos, all the track threes, right? So like Late Registration track one, Graduation track one, 808s track one, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and we'd get to the end, we'd go do all the track twos. And what happened was that we're still learning the format of the show and had less quality equipment. So a lot of those first like 4 or 5 episodes on each album just weren't as good quality wise and content wise. So we took them all down because it just didn't reflect where the show was at anymore, and are redoing all of the albums. So we just finished Graduation. We're doing 808s right now, and we're actually doing a rush, like not a rush, but just increasing the pace to get through everything over the next couple of months. So we should have My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy up sometime in July, which is quick for us. So yeah, those will be up again. And that's like a good example of, there were things that we were noting in the last half of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy that we just weren't noting in the first half because we didn't quite have the format down yet and weren't quite used to doing this kind of analysis yet. So the second time through is going to be bonkers. And yeah, I do think that there's this really cool connection to, especially the daughter, because on All of the Lights, he positions this theoretical daughter as essentially like having a horrible life, right? She just ends up in the worst version of who she is. I never really took it as it being his metaphor for his inner child art necessarily. That's something I'll have to think about a little more so as just his failures or potential failures as somebody that's like trying to have a family or potential career or his future or anything, which kind of fits in with that idea. But when you look at the future he saw there versus the future he saw in Violent Crimes and kind of correcting course, right? It is cool to see that that difference, especially with Kanye himself kind of being like, okay, now I'm in a much better place than I was on that album, and I can see a happy ending for not only myself, but my child and the future of everything, which is really cool. Like our Violent Crimes episode is one of my favorite episodes that we've ever done. So if you haven't listened to that, I recommend listening to it. Especially like the last voicemail from Nikki and how we bring that back to dark fantasy, and it's cool. But yeah, I'm really excited to get into My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy again for all of those reasons, because we can put it in context with what we know about Ye now, and like Ye the album, but also Kanye now and Jesus is King and all this stuff. Boz, what is your opinion on leak compilations like there are for Yandi, So Help Me God, TurboGrafx? Do you listen to unreleased stuff as well? This has come up a couple times now. It's been like the main theme of these questions. I don't listen to them often. Like some leaks, like God Level, I really wanted to listen to. I guess God Level is one of my favorite leaks too. But I just don't tend to be as interested in unfinished work as I am finished work, and do think that leaks with stuff that before something has dropped are more problematic than, like, if people are finding leaks for So Help Me God now, it's kind of like, okay, that project's so far in the past at this point, that seems fine, or at least like fair game a little bit, right? But getting leaks for Donda when Donda is supposed to come out, I think is problematic. And I get fans just wanting to have that and why people get involved. I think the people selling it shouldn't be selling it. Like, it's unfair to the artists. It's unfair to the artists. So I do struggle more when it's something that could come out. But then there's still the argument, like, No More Parties in LA was a beat that was made in the My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy era that Kanye sat on and eventually used 6 years later. So if that had been leaked, would he have still used it? And would we have ended up with that song that's, I think, a beloved Kanye song? Probably not. So it is like a mixed bag. But I tend to feel like if it's at least a few years old, the project's out, that the song was associated with, then it's a little more fair game. But if it's still coming out, yeah, people shouldn't be leaking that. But I can't blame fans for being excited and wanting to hear it. And yeah, I know I've been guilty. Like All Day, when All Day leaked, I was all over that because it just sounded so good, right? And I was listening to it on repeat. Yeah, mixed bag. ECR, thoughts on Kanye's choice to not reveal too much of what he puts into the art so people find personal meaning, don't just limit to what he consciously put into it. Yeah, I think it's the preferred way of going about things. Like, I like Kanye's approach more than I like Kendrick's approach on to Pimp a Butterfly. But then the problem is that when Kanye doesn't necessarily explain what he's doing or ground it as much as Kendrick does on Good Kid, Mad City and To Pimp a Butterfly, you then have a lot that's lost and a lot of people that doubt that anything is going on. So that becomes a little more problematic in the long term, or I guess in the short term. I mean, in the long term, you hope that the work is good enough and speaks for itself and people start to realize the genius there. Like, hopefully what people are doing with Yeezus at this point, right? And Life of Pablo, that there's more going on than what they initially thought. There's a story, this concept, how cool is this? And that over time, those projects are as respected as ones that explain themselves a little bit more, but then even grow in esteem because there's so much more you can start digging into it. It's the same reason why I prefer Damn to Pimp a Butterfly and Good Kid, Mad City, because as much as I love those two projects from Kendrick and think they're 10 out of 10s, Damn is just so much less specific in a lot of ways in terms of, like, I'm telling you exactly what I mean by this, that it opens up how much you can take away from the album. So yeah, I prefer what Kanye does, but I do think it's complicating in that if you never come out and say anything and nobody is going to do the work of putting together podcasts that explain everything that you're doing, a lot of what you attempted could be lost forever if nobody's really actively taking the time to think through it. So, Willie, favorite player on the Browns. I gotta go. I've always been a secondary guy. I've always loved running backs and secondary. So Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb. But of course, Myles Garrett. We both love poetry and dinosaurs. That's really the only two things we have similarities in terms of like size, strength. I've torn 4 ACLs, and I don't think he's torn anything ever. But Garrett, Baker, of course, like all of them. Odell, Jarvis has been a joy, right? I wasn't sure when we traded for him if he'd like being in Cleveland, and then he's just come in and been such like a leader, such a perfect player. Like I want him to be on the team for the rest of his career. I love Njoku as well, like his touchdown celebration. Like I was so upset when Njoku wanted traded, and I'm so happy that he wants to stay now. So yeah, this Browns team is the most excited I've ever been for football, which is crazy because I've always been more of a baseball guy, but the Browns are definitely more exciting than the Indians at this point. ECR, did you disagree with Cole on anything about Yeezus? Also, did you change his mind on any other Kanye albums? I think we were generally in agreement on The Life of Pablo. We ended up doing something with Life of Pablo with him, which I don't know if it's come out yet or will come out. I think it's supposed to come out. Maybe that's a spoiler, but I think we changed his mind or like helped with some stuff there. And he just said in the latest episode where we did the song draft that there were things that he didn't realize about Yeezus until reading our scripts, like the Omega sample on New Slaves was something he never realized, and then was like, oh my goodness. But we haven't really talked about any other albums in depth. Like we haven't talked My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and gotten into like you feel this way and I feel this way. Let us convince you of this. We did have a little bit of a disagreement in terms of The Life of Pablo, where he felt an interpretation that I had of the tracks after Silver Surfer Intermission. He wasn't as convinced that they weren't bonus as I am convinced that they aren't bonus. So in the episode, we had to find like a middle ground there of how to address that was true to our perspective on the album, but also true to his perspective on the album. So that would probably just be the main disagreement that we had. And that's just more him being like wanting more evidence that these things aren't bonus, right? Where I feel like the only reason people think that they are bonus is because of 30 Hours, where Kanye is on the extended track, right? Where he's talking and he's like, this is the bonus track, this is the bonus joint. But to me, when he says this is the bonus track, he's talking about the actual tape that's being recorded, right? Because when he used to do takes for these songs, you're on the track. So the track was the song, but it could also be that current take. And I think that's what Kanye was doing, because 30 Hours had the initial version that didn't have that outro. So Kanye was recording a new track to add to the outro. So when he's saying this is the bonus joint, this is the bonus track, I don't think he was talking about 30 Hours itself, but that extended outro to 30 Hours. But because 30 Hours is the first song following Silver Surfer Intermission, people just treat that as bonus and then think of the rest of the songs as bonus. But I still think of them as part of the actual track list. So, I'm trying to think if on one of the track lists that he released before Life of Pablo came out, it said bonus at some point. And maybe that's also why people think it's bonus. But I don't think that he did. I think it was just like the 10 tracks, 10 tracks, 10 tracks. And then suddenly there was the whole like 20 track list showing up. And people were like, oh, these must be bonus songs now, especially because of this intermission. But I don't think so. I think it's all part of the discography. And that's why the intermission is an intermission, right? And not an outro followed by bonus. It's an intermission before the next part. What do you value the most in art, and how do you decide what to see, listen, read next, and what to analyze on a deeper level out of everything available on the internet and culture? That's a deep question. How long is this so far? 49 minutes, and I've barely answered any questions. Man, I just talk and talk. All right, this will be the last one for this video. Man, we really are going to have a part 3. I'm so sorry. So, um, the thing I value most in art is, I think, subtext. Like, I want to say subtext, but I think about a movie like Kick-Ass, and Kick-Ass doesn't have a lot of subtext, and I love it. But I like the meeting of form and function. I think that's one of the things that I really love, that when something is done, it's done for a reason, and that how something is presented reinforces what is presented. So you think about Fight Club and the use of voiceover. I tend to think voiceover isn't a great thing to have in movies, that is usually superficial and could be cut, and is just kind of a crutch that people can use when they're not conveying something well enough in the story itself. But for Fight Club, because you're dealing with somebody that's having this dissociative identity disorder and literally talking to themselves, when, like, it's Edward Norton and Brad Pitt, right? It's just the same person having this conversation. It's really fitting for him to be talking to us and essentially talking to himself and working through the story. So that's one of the reasons why, like, that voiceover really works for me, and all the cuts and the structure of the story, it all reinforces that. So I really like when art has a reason for what's going on, rather than just, this is funny, this is cool. Like, wasn't that just neat? But that it ties back somehow thematically or is in some way meaningful. So I can just enjoy a work for being fun, right? Like, I love the Marvel movies. I love superhero stuff. I love a lot of comedies, just like Wedding Crashers is one of my favorite movies. Jurassic Park is a top, maybe my number 5 favorite movie, right? And my second favorite movie of all time is Groundhog Day. So it's not like everything is just pretension, even though I am very pretentious. But I do really appreciate and love when something takes a next step beyond just the basic and starts going to that next level in terms of having nuance or subtext, or changing, breaking from known structures and plot points, which I think is why I love Groundhog Day so much. The idea of just repeating this story over and over again, but making unique changes to it each time, was such a breathtaking thing to me. So that's one of the things I look forward to the most in art. And the same thing with why I love Kanye's music. It's the same thing with books. Like 2666 is a crazy book. Under the Volcano is one of my favorite books, and that's crazy. Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian is another, like, thought-provoking, stylized book. But then something like George Saunders, who's a current writer that a lot of people really like, I just hate his stuff. And The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde was another thing that just really annoyed me as try hard. So there tends to be like a thin line between feeling indulgence, which I can't believe I'm talking about feeling indulgent when this is a 53-minute Ask Me Anything, and the part 2, right? Like 2 hours of me just answering questions. But the difference between, like, feeling indulgent and feeling artistically necessary. And I decide what to see, listen, and read next. You know, it's getting harder. I feel like when I was in my early 20s, it was just like, oh, there's all these great things that I haven't discovered. And now it's at a point where I feel like I've watched so many movies and listened to so much, and like TV shows and books, that it's becoming harder to find something that feels like fresh and renewing and exciting in a way that some of those early things did. It's like, once you've seen Jaws, what compares to Jaws in terms of like thrillers, right? Like, once you've seen Alien, once you've seen Predator, maybe that's just like some boomer talk or like old head talk. And there are, of course, new movies every year, new music every year that is thought-provoking, that does go into your favorites. It just can be exhausting starting to hunt for it. So at this point, it's me actually going to a lot of just recommendations. From music and movies, I've been using Rate Your Music, because it seems like the recommendations you get from there are very nuanced. and work through a lot of the like classics that you should see or should listen to. And if you haven't, you're missing out, while also introducing a lot of random things that I'd never consider from like other countries or genres that are outside the norm for me. So Rate Your Music, I think, is a good place for that to start building up recommendations. For TV shows, I'm just like starting to run out of what to watch. Same with like anime. It's a struggle every time. I just want to keep going back and rewatching the things that I used to like. And then for books, there's just so many. I just start going to like countries at this point as well. So like Russian, like great Russian literature that I haven't read, great Japanese literature that I haven't read, great poets. Like I haven't read Lorca, so I got a book of poetry by Lorca that I'm gonna read next. So that's it for this one. Oh my god. We'll come back into the next one in a day or two. So thank you for listening. I can't believe if people are watching to the end of this video. I hope it was entertaining, at least in some way, though I feel like it's just droning of me answering questions, but maybe that's exciting for you. But definitely appreciate the love and support. And until next time, stay weavy, stay wavy, and please keep it loopy.